I appreciate you guys all for jumping on today. I am very excited to catch up with Matt. Matt and I were connected last year, and I was introduced to a little bit of what he's got going on in the world of podcasting and creating your own brand, becoming MicroFamous, and pursuing results is one of his websites that you should definitely check out. So we're going to have Matt introduce himself here in a minute, but just before we get started, to remind everybody that's joining us for the first time, the reason that we have these open we stand meetups are to empower small business. Everything that we do is to give visibility and advocacy so that small business can stay open. They can get ideas and concepts and see that we're all human, right? And we're all overcoming challenges together. So we love having people like Matt on. You know, we've had Manny, who's joining us today, on in the past, and these are just fantastic meetups. So I'd love to have, you know, the team introduce themselves first, and then Matt will let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background. So Rachel, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel McCool. I'm with GoDaddy. I'm a community manager, been with the company for over 5 years and located in the San Francisco Bay Area, therefore my backdrop.
Beautiful. Thank you. Angela, how about you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Angela from GoDaddy. I'm a GoDaddy Pro community manager here and worked in support for a long time. I'm based in Marion, Iowa. Don't know where that is, so I don't have a backdrop.
No, it's probably beautiful outside. Thank you for supporting us. Jonathan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jonathan Graziano. I work on the brand social media team. I work specifically on the engagement team, doing everything from day-to-day engagements with customers to coordinating common response guides for events and working with our customer support team. And I have one of the older MacBook Pros, so I actually don't have the capability to put a virtual background on my laptop. And I've submitted a ticket to tech saying my laptop is broken and I need a new one. And when they ask me to say what's broken about it, apparently this doesn't count as like a broken laptop. But I have to say 11 months into quarantine, I have to beg to differ. So hopefully one day you guys will see me with some great backdrop. But for now, you have my backlit living room. So enjoy that.
Well, Jonathan, we appreciate you. I also am unable to do that, so you guys get the beautiful hotel room that I am staying in. Manny, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, bud, before we get started with Matt?
Appreciate you guys. I'm Manny Larcher. I grateful that I was on last week, and you know, I definitely think it helps with, you know, like you guys said, visibility. And I'm a CEO of Stopwatch Creative. We're a full service marketing and advertising agency, and we also incubate products.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Well, my name is Adam Griggs. I'm the co-founder and creator of Clarify, and I'm your moderator today. And without further ado, I would love to introduce you guys to Matt Johnson. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm an agency owner as well. We specialize in podcast production, so we just sell one thing to one kind of person. So our clients are typically business experts, so coaches, entrepreneurs, consultants, speaker, author types, thought leaders in their field, and we completely, you know, just handle everything behind the scenes. So podcast launch and production, and you know, that got started from me being at an agency years ago, and I got into live Google Hangouts and started, you know, talking with influencers in my space. And one of those guys pitched me on starting a podcast, and that was 2015. And since then, just kept going down that path into the world of podcasting, which resulted in kind of the path to writing the book MicroFamous.
So I got to ask, did you always want to be a personality? I mean, is that something that you just thought since you were a kid? Like,
no. So I'm the least likely to be an entrepreneur person ever. So I was a pastor's kid, homeschooled, and assumed I was either going to go somewhere and start a church or be in a band. So I pursued both of those for a while. I chased the dream as a musician for about 5 years, and then came off of that and decided that, you know, I built up some marketing skills doing that, and was like, it's way more valuable in the business world. I should go work for an agency and figure out, you know, how to make some money and then do music on the side and stuff. And so, yeah, I was definitely not that person that thought I would ever be like a business personality or influencer type.
So I guess, what was the crossover? Where was the moment where, I mean, was it when your friends told you to start the podcast, or was there moments before then you knew that it was leading up to this journey?
No, it really was the podcast thing, I would say. I had decided, previous to that to kind of make marketing my profession. And that was what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and then just kind of pursue music as a side project. But I didn't know how it was going to like shake out. I was working for another agency and was perfectly happy to keep kind of working for somebody else for quite a while. And it just happened that I got the opportunity to go be a consultant and a partner in like a new coaching consulting business in that space. So I jumped on that opportunity. And the way that we marketed that business was to start a podcast. So I ended up hosting 3 at a time, all in the same space. And it was that exposure and starting to get to have really deep, interesting conversations with influential, smart people. And then it happened to also grow those businesses. And I'm like, okay, well, that was like the light bulb moment. Like, all right, this is what I should be doing. I kind of found finally, after, however many 20 years in the business world, I kind of found where I belonged.
I love it. I mean, you can just tell that you're confident in what you're saying about how your journey kind of unraveled and evolved into where you're at now. So I guess when you're working with consultants and clients and you're helping them find their own, like I'm assuming you're working with other podcasters and people trying to build their own brand, right?
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So what is the number one thing you start with when you ask a client, like, why do you want to do this?
Well, one of the number one questions I ask is, who's the right person? Because that's one of the things that we all need to get clarity on. And a lot of the problems I think we have, whether you are in the business world operating as like an entrepreneur, or whether you've already gone out and started your thing, it's all the same problem. It's who do you want to surround yourself with almost every day of your life. So somebody asked me a variation of this question. It was like I think it was on a podcast episode one time. And she just made reference to the fact that I'm an introvert, and just asked like how many people do you want around you on an average day? And I'm like, 5 or 6, 7 people, maybe. That's about it. I'm not a huge extrovert, so I don't need a ton of people in my life. And that was a really good insight into the type of business that I needed to run. Like, I don't need a ton of people. I want really good, deep relationships with clients that I really enjoy and care about, and I'm deeply invested in their success. And so that's kind of that was a clue into how I should structure my life and my business. And most people, I don't think anybody ever really stops to answer that question, like, who is the right person for you? If you're in business with somebody, if you're serving a client, or if you're working for a boss or a coworker, if they called you up one day and said, hey man, let's go grab a drink or grab a coffee, would you take them up on it, or would you find a way to get out of it? And once I figured out who I actually wanted to take them up on it, then I was like, okay, well, those are the people I need to go all in on. And then everything else became a lot easier once I made that decision.
Yeah, that's powerful. I appreciate you saying that. Number one, saying that you came from a position of being an introvert. And then the power in that question, because it's so often like when we're reading online or following some of these influencers, and you and I kind of talked about this before we jumped on the call, there's kind of this message that you can be everything to everyone and you should be working for that. And it's not necessarily true, because if you want to have a deep, meaningful life and business and make an impact, it's okay to find a niche and a community that you're surrounded with. One of the things that I love about this community that we're in right now and you're speaking to is that they're all like-minded small business owners, and they're all vulnerable, and they're all waiting to figure out what's their next step. And it's okay, because sometimes we interact and sometimes we don't, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there is not. I think a lot of the marketing advice out there right now is coming from extroverts, and it works really well for extroverts, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have to, as much as I would disagree with certain things on Gary Vee's approach and the Grant Cardones of the world and all those folks, I have to say with the caveat that it works for them. And it works for a lot of people I know that have similar personalities to them. Like, look, if you can run off of 4 hours of sleep and you don't really work is what you enjoy, then that approach is going to work for you. I think one of Gary Vee's videos for this year was how to get the maximum number of eyeballs on your business in 2021. Of course, that video has hundreds of thousands of views because everybody thinks that's the problem. So I had a really interesting experience a few years back that broke that belief that was the most important thing. And here's what it was. I was running 2 different podcasts in the same space. One of them had a mainstream audience in that space and got all the downloads, all the attention on social media, all the accolades in that industry. We got written up in the trade publications. We made all the top 10, top 20 podcast lists, all that stuff. on the other side, I was running a podcast in the same space that had a super, super niche audience, like where there's only 10 or 12,000 potential clients in that space every year. That was the podcast that was actually way easier to monetize. I was a partner in both of the coaching consulting businesses behind both of those podcasts. So behind the scenes, I was like accidentally running this split test in marketing. And I got to see that the podcast that had the niche audience was the one that actually was way easier to monetize. So then I'm like, okay, well, that broke that whole thing, that the problem is getting the maximum number of eyeballs. Because I had a podcast that had a ton of eyeballs and it was harder to monetize than the other one. And so once that belief system broke, I'm like, okay, well, attention isn't really the problem, because attention doesn't automatically convert into sales. So for most like small business owners, marketers, whatever, the goal shouldn't be to get the maximum number of eyeballs. We need to get the right people looking at our stuff, right? And that's a completely different, like once you kind of change your perspective on that, it changes a lot of things. But even if you guys walk away with one thing, from the chat here today, it would be that it's that attention doesn't convert into sales automatically. So everybody that's out there just indiscriminately chasing free attention on social media, they're hoping it translates to sales. But a good portion of the time, it just doesn't, and they don't know why. And you can see it in the questions they ask of Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and all those people, because there's a bunch of them that are confused. Wildly confused because they're creating a whole bunch of content, getting attention, and they can't figure out why it doesn't convert to sales.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. I mean, I don't know about the others in the group here, but that is an experience that I've had to learn as well.
Yeah. I just have to say, like working in social media, like that's anytime. And I actually worked for Gary Vee at my very first job. I was at VaynerMedia. And it's interesting because that was the conversation at the time, was how do we just get the most people to see this stuff for the least amount of money? Like how do we just make a really big splash in this huge pool? And even like as I've grown in my career and working with GoDaddy and building this brand, we've only been really focusing on brand content for a little over 2 years now. It's been amazing to realize, like, we can build this, we can put all of these resources in this massive campaign, but some of the most effective content we have, and our goals aren't necessarily conversions as much as they are just like reactions and engagements, but some of the most effective content that we can put out as far as building conversations are niche oriented. They are ones that this might isolate 90% of our audience if we post, I'm not going to turn them off, but it might not be relevant to them. But it's so hyper relevant to this group of people that the value it's worth it, right? The value's there. So it's incredible to hear you say that, because I feel like that sort of mindset of, you just need to figure out how to get eyeballs on things is something that people kind of perpetuate in a lot of different channels, a lot of different types of fields of media consumption. And it's just not, it just doesn't work for everyone. And it's very interesting to hear you say that, because I'm totally with you.
Yeah, and it's good to hear you say that. Like that's not just my imagination kind of being like seeing Gary Vee at a distance. Like, it's nice to hear, because I know some people that have hung out with him and gone to his office and brought him in to speak and stuff, but I've never met anyone that worked directly for him. But yeah, like I don't think Gary Vee, because he's such an extrovert and has such like this internal combustion engine that just freaking runs all the time, just that he's got a motor, I don't think he relates to someone like me, and maybe other people resonate with this, that look, I'm an extroverted introvert, so I can turn it on when I need it. But man, like once I do a speaking engagement, I don't want to do the after party and the after party. I want to go take a nap, right? Yeah. And I don't want to be on social media for 3 days, because I don't have the energy to create and the content and engage in real time the way that Gary Vee does for hours a day, and then still run the business. And that's even coming from somebody who I run the operations of my agency in around 4 hours a week. Even I still don't have the energy to do social media 2-3 hours a day. And I've got a very like smooth running, systematic business that doesn't take up a lot of time and energy like it does for a lot of people. And even I still don't have a bunch left over. So if I can't do it as an extroverted introvert and have all the other advantages of a good business, what is the average small business owner who is spending 8 to 10 hours a day in the business, running the business, making sure that they make a profit. How are they spending 4 hours a day on social media? Like, the math just doesn't work. And I don't think Gary Vee really relates to that, which is fine. Like I said, his advice works for the people it works for, and for the people that don't, though, we feel pressured, guilty, left out, left behind, and we're wondering, like, what in the world are we going to do? Because I feel like this approach works, but I just can't execute it. And I would say you're not the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all I can say is wow to all of what you just said. I think that so many small business owners hear about all of this stuff, like, I should be doing all of this, right? And then they try it. And to your point, I love that we're talking about introvert, extrovert, because I think that it does require a lot of energy to do, even podcasting, like what you're doing. It requires a lot of energy. And, but, people like hearing all of these things that they should be doing for their businesses, like through social, and it's completely overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
And then they spend a lot of money sometimes on campaigns that they don't really know how to set up. They're not really sure about the right audience. And then they end up spending all this money and they don't get the return on investment. And they get really freaked out by that. And rightly so. I would too, if I was in their position. So just having advice on like how to think through that. And then the other point I love that you made about knowing yourself and surrounding yourself with the kind of people you want to work with, I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially for introverts, because I think it's, we enjoy like having really deep relationships with just a fewer number of people. Extroverts are really happy. Like a lot of extroverts have that core group of really close relationships too. But then they also have kind of, I would say, this middle circle where they can have lots and lots and lots of more shallower relationships that they really enjoy and that gives them energy back. That's the part that introverts don't have. It's like you're either, what is it from Meet the Parents or whatever. It's like you're there's the circle of trust, and then there's everyone else. Like everyone else in the world is outside the circle of trust for an introvert. And I don't think extroverts really relate to that because they enjoy having that kind of middle ground where you're not in my circle of trust, but you don't really need to be because we're still friends and we enjoy each other and we hang out and I get energy from your energy and all that stuff. Introverts don't get energy from that, which is part of why being on social media, being more social, like the pressure to be more social, the pressure to be everywhere all the time, the pressure to now jump on Clubhouse, the pressure to be on TikTok and all this stuff. Just when an introverted business owner looks at that and goes, holy cow, all that sounds exhausting. And they're right. To an extrovert, it doesn't necessarily sound exhausting because to them it's being social, and being social gives them energy. So I think, unfortunately, just the fact that over the last, 10, 15 years or so, marketing has become synonymous with social media. Right. I think somebody asked me the other day, like, hey, what's your Instagram handle? And I'm like, it's my brand name, but I'm never there. Like, I basically have it so somebody doesn't steal it and do dumb things in my name on Instagram. And they're like, well, wait a minute, you're not active on Instagram, but you're in marketing. I'm like, yeah, it's because I'm in marketing that I'm not spending all my time on Instagram. It's because I know what the F I'm doing. But that's just, it's a symptom of the zeitgeist we live in, that the idea that, man, you're in marketing, you're not spending 2 hours a day on Instagram, is just evidence of the fact that those two things are kind of, gets lumped into one thing, and it's not. Marketing has existed for 120 years. It's a good 100 years before Facebook came along. I think we could do without it.
I think running a business is exhausting enough, let alone being overwhelmed by all the shoulda, woulda, coulda, marketing advice we get thrown at us from the people who are ultimately selling those products anyways online. So
yes, good point.
One of the things that you and I had talked about before was creating your own brand without sacrificing your identity. And I think that aligns with being an introvert and finding your community. And that's what I love. When you find your online community, your tribe, you're able to be yourself and really thrive, regardless of if you're introverted, extroverted. If you have a specific niche or a specific passion, you're allowed to do that in those environments. So my question to you, Matt, is what have you seen small business owners do to help find their tribe or find their community?
In terms of finding your community, that is one place where social media does have an advantage. So LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, things like that, those are good places to connect. When you get into the identity stuff, it's really interesting because I think there is one place where people struggle, which I think I might be able to shed some light on, which is that if you really want to have a good, profitable, sustainable business, you do have to become known for one thing. And one of the very first challenges you'll run up against is that sense of identity, right? Like for me, the MicroFamous, like, ooh, man, like, do I really want to be the MicroFamous guy? Right? Does John Maxwell really want to be the leadership guy for the rest of all time? Does Gary Vee want to be the hustle guy? I don't know. It sounds to me like he's shifting away. I think Gary Vee is probably tired of being the hustle guy by now, but too bad. That's what he'll be for a long time because that's where he made his name. So in terms of finding your community, I think you have to find that inner circle of people that do understand your full identity, where you can be yourself, and working with the types of clients or coworkers or bosses and people like that where you can be yourself, finding that tribe of right people. For me, it was, business experts and thought leaders, because I realized that that's the people I'd spend my time with anyway for fun. I literally can sit around and talk about group coaching models for hours. Well, like just the most esoteric to somebody else, that's dumb. But to me, it's fun. So I realized that that's who my right people are. But if I want to build a successful company, I have to be known for one thing. So I don't talk a lot about group coaching, even though I do enjoy it, and that's where my clients are in. I don't talk about like the structure of group coaching because that's not what I sell. So I leave that part of my identity for the relationships that I have behind the scenes with people. But when I market, it's all about reinforcing the idea of MicroFamous. And I've come to like settle in myself that I'm okay being the MicroFamous guy, even though I have all these other dimensions of my personality that people may never get to know, because I'd rather be known for one thing than to not be known at all.
Yeah, I mean, people are icebergs, right? We only see the tip of the picture, and it's crazy to think about wanting to be known for one thing. I mean, in this day and age, because of how connected and how fast paced we think we have to be, it's crazy to think that you have to settle on one thing. But it's okay to do that, and then have your interactions on the side drive some of your interests and your passions outside of that. I'm glad that you said that, because I feel like so many business owners, especially people that are going to be listening to this call, do find that they have a passion that they're very good at, and they've got interests that kind of stray away from that or might distract from that. So having a personality online and in your business that drives the tip of the iceberg, but allowing yourself to remain a person and interact is important. I think it is. Yeah. It's important. So no, I appreciate that.
It also makes me, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say the other thing about this is I feel like, and Rachel touched on this a little bit, but I really liked listening to this because I feel like a lot of times people who want, and I say this as someone who is not currently in line to launch a business, but I feel like a lot of people who may be ready to launch a business or thinking about launch a business will see things from these very high visibility entrepreneurs, and they'll think that's what I have to do.
Yes.
Right? They'll think this is the route. If I want to get to this place, not necessarily as, the hustle guy, but if I want to get to this level of success, these are the things I have to do. And it's delivered as scripture, so people take it as scripture. And it's so nice to hear from someone who has achieved that level of success, but is able to say, there are other ways to do this. That is one way to go about it, but it is not the only way to do it. And it's just very, someone who is not thinking of launching a business, I even find that very encouraging. And I know that there are going to be people who listen to this who are at that precipice, and they're going to listen to this and they're going to go, oh, so I do have the tools to do this. Even if I don't want, I'm not interested in investing X amount of time in this space, I still have the tools to do this, and I'm still capable of this thing. And I think that is so potent. I think that's so powerful and very, very special.
Yeah. And if there's one thing that you can take away from this, like whether you're in Jonathan, your situation where you're not launching a business, if you're about to, or if you already have, there's one thing that like from my experience that I think might be really helpful, which is there was a point in my life where I was hanging around with ultra successful people. And it started really, really revealing all the limited beliefs, all the mindset, all the money issues, all the junk from the religious whiplash I had growing up, and the way that my initial forays into entrepreneurship went, and all this stuff. I had a ton of junk. And I've heard all the advice, like you'll never succeed if you can't visualize it and picture it with 100% comp, like all that stuff. Like you got to change your mindset before you can succeed. And I tried, and none of it worked for me, right? None of it. What worked for me was deciding I may not be able to fix that, but what I can do is put one foot in front of the other and do what successful people do and build systems around me that allow me to be myself and let the chips fall where they may. And that ended up working really well for me. So like that light bulb moment of realizing that maybe I don't need to change. Maybe I just need a better system around me. And I started tinkering with the system of my life and my business and the marketing and stuff like that. Like that's what changed everything. So, I mean, to anyone that feels like they don't have the tools, they can't do what they're being pressured to do, or you just feel like you have a screwed up mindset, that was me. I mean, I have a screwed up mindset, but I didn't let that stop me. I built a system around me that allows me to be myself and still get the results that I want to get. So as far as, takeaways from this, I mean, hopefully that's helpful, but my message right now, and a lot of the reason why I talk about introverts and extroverts is I don't think introverts need to change. We don't need to become Gary Vee. Just on a very practical level. That's a good example that people can really grab onto, but it's an example of the bigger principle, which is that you don't need to change to get what you want in life. You just need to put systems around you that allow you to be yourself and still get what you want, and that's something that any of us can do.
I'm so glad that you and Jonathan both touched on tools and systems, because that when you're trying to create something that's going to be niche oriented or find your brand and you want to have confidence moving forward and you will fail, you have to have something that's going to tell you why, where, and how to get yourself, off the ground, dust off and try again. So Matt, I'm going to ask this question just kind of bluntly, and you don't have to tell us, but in an initial client consult, is there a system or a rundown of tools or a discussion, like a checklist or anything that you go through with clients to kind of gear up and find where they're at?
Oh yeah. I have years ago, I put together like a discovery call checklist that had like 15 things. And then when I started training a sales guy to take those calls over for me, I broke it down into a checklist of not only like those questions to ask, but also a ideal client checklist and a red flag checklist. Like if they exhibited any of these 4 red flags, I automatically out. Because I'm very selective about who I bring into the agency because they have access to me. I have to talk to them. I have to believe in them and all that stuff. So yeah, I definitely, it's something I built for myself. So I don't know if you were hoping for something I could offer to other people, but so I may have misunderstood the question, but I do have that. I did create it for myself. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I love it. I appreciate you for being on today. I want to be conscious of everybody's time. It seems like a couple of our group members need to drop. Yep. So before they go, do you guys want to offer any kudos or last minute commentary for Matt?
I just have to say, I am really going to walk away thinking more about the introvert extrovert. I've done a lot of work on knowing where I fall in that category, good. But just that was really fantastic. And also the overall, like, you don't have to do it all. Like, just do what works for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's so refreshing to get this perspective when thinking about starting a small business, managing a small business, anything involving that kind of facet of entrepreneurship. I feel like even just having been on social media for as long as I have and working on social for as long as I have, you rarely see those posts that go viral, right? You always see the big ones that are like, I woke up at 2 a.m., I did like, if you're not up at 6 a.m. exercising before 7 on calls, like, what are you really doing for that time? And it's so incredible to hear from someone to just be like, I was sleeping, like, and I was still succeeding. Like, you know what I mean? It takes so much of the, it's so scary to launch a business. Again, from no experience, I can imagine it's so scary to take that leap, but how nice to know that you don't have to change every facet of who you are in order to do something like this. Like, you really do have the tools. You just have to find out how to use your words. You just have to figure out how to sort of change the workspace around you, and how do you make this work for the way that you want to build a business. It's really invaluable info, and I can't wait to share this with other people. I've really taken so much away from this, and I'm very keen to blow off this other call, but I just can't.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I
But
need to
yeah,
go
I really
too.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you so much, Matt. And thank you,
Cool.
Adam.
Yeah, thank you,
Appreciate
Adam.
Yeah,
you
thank you
doing it
guys.
from Georgia.
No, I appreciate you guys being on today. Thank you for the support.
See you later.
All right, bye guys.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Angela, did you want to leave last minute comments for Matt?
I did. I had a question, but I think it's probably going to take a little too long to answer. So I
Hit
can
me.
probably.
30
Are
seconds.
you sure?
I can knock it out.
Okay, so it's slightly off topic. It's a little bit less about method and more about application.
Okay.
I've met people who they had, their niche, they had their brand, they have their personality. When you talk to them in like a conversational setting, they're great. And then they tell you, I'm launching this new podcast or I'm doing a YouTube series, and it's their first time doing anything like that. And you're like, yes, this is going to be great. 100% gonna love this person's content. And then you start watching or listening and it's so scripted. It's like, this is not the same person I talked to. None of that personality is coming through. Or when they do it, it seems like they're trying too hard to put their personality into it, and it's no longer
Right.
like a conversation. And I'm not talking about podcasts where they're interviewing someone or having a discussion, but the ones that they're doing themselves, that they're just talking by themselves. And I think that's where people get this disconnect, and then they feel like they're on the spot. And I think that probably falls under some introvert problems there, that maybe they feel like it needs to be perfect. So I wanted your thoughts on that, and whether or not you struggled with it when you first started doing podcasts.
I did, which generated massive insecurity, by the way, because by the time I launched my own podcast and did any solo episodes, I had been live podcasting for 4 years. So I thought I had it. I'll just rip off a couple of bullet points. I'll go and then I listened to it back and I'm like, well, this sucks. So I started scripting my solo episodes. Then I started getting more comfortable, and now I can just write out a few bullet points and record the episode, and it's fine. Podcasting, YouTube videos, a lot of that stuff, it's a lot like people used to say about radio. You just need to put your butt in the seat and do the reps. And you'll get better at it. So that's what I tell clients when they come in. Their solo episodes aren't going to be perfect. It's okay. Script them out if you need to. You'll get more comfortable. Just do it for 6 months and then come back and listen, and you'll see a massive difference between the first ones and the ones that you do that far in. And usually that's all they need.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the extra time to answer that question.
Yeah,
You were
of course.
a lot
Happy to.
faster than I thought. I'm like, oh, this one's going to be a deep one.
No, because I've given it a lot of thought, because it happened to
Awesome.
me. Yeah. Well, thanks, Angela. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
No, thanks for joining us today. Matt, is there somewhere that we can send the clients and the community members of Open We Stand to kind of connect with you online and follow you?
Yeah, so MicroFamous, the podcast is out there. The book is on Amazon. And then if you want to just connect with me about everything, or if you're interested in launching a podcast, we've got, I'm adding all of my podcast launch materials and production materials are all going into my digital product called the Fast Track. So that's a really good way, because you may not be exactly the right person where we can work with you on our agency, but we have all of our stuff for getting featured on podcasts, building relationships, creating micro content, launching a show. Like all that stuff is in my digital product called the Fast Track, and that's at getmicrofamous.com.
Wonderful. Well, Matt, we appreciate you so much. This has been so valuable.
Thanks, man.
We can go on for hours. I just got to say. And so I appreciate you for condensing that and answering these questions. Just riffing the way you did, it was amazing.